from Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, K-State's Eric Adee will discuss the performance level to expect from corn planted in late May or June, drawing from multiple years of K-State field studies at several sites in the state. They discovered that often, under the right circumstances, late-planted corn can yield enough to make the attempt worthwhile. Also today, K-State's Robin Reid will talk about two topics related to livestock forage availability, including a new hay inventory calculator she's put together for you producers to gauge your cow herd forage needs moving forward. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Zac Hoppenstedt on organic control of vegetable garden insects. All that here on Agriculture Today. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Here we are in the latter part of May, and the question arises for those who have yet to plant corn, is it too late to do so and still have good agronomic performance? Well, this is a subject that has been studied in field at numerous K-State research facilities in recent years, and one of those who's been directly involved in that is with us now. He is the agronomist in charge of K-State's Kansas River Valley and East Central Kansas experiment fields. Eric Adee is with us to talk about what has been found out in the research along this line. Eric, just to set the table here further, though, there are many elements to this, one of which is crop insurance deadlines. We need to keep that in mind. But this is a possibility that producers are considering.
Yes, we can't always predict the weather. We were just talking earlier about off the radio about we were so dry when we were trying to plant corn, and now we're so wet when we're trying to plant beans. So every year in Kansas, we always have some kind of challenge. We don't know where it's going to show up, but often planting can be an issue, especially in some parts of the state where we get too much water at the wrong time, and some soils don't dry out very fast. So we can get stuck with being faced with a decision. Are we going to plant corn late, or are we going to switch to soybeans? And that kind of is an issue, because especially if you've already put on your anhydrous. This year it's so expensive. You've got $150 an acre already put in fertilizer. You don't want to waste that. And it doesn't really help the soybeans much. But when you're faced with that option, when you're getting late in the season like we are getting now, what is potential outcome going to be? Are you going to get your money back? Are you going to make some money, or is it time to cut your losses? Right. So as a reason, this research came up.
There's another angle to this that's worth mentioning, though, and that is one can think about delayed corn planting with the goal, if you will, of trying to avoid the intense midsummer heat when that crop is pollinating, right?
Exactly. With dryland farming, you got a whole lot more variables, and the weather is so critical, especially unless you have the perfect soil. You're going to really depend on water at the right time, and also the heat at pollination is a very critical thing, especially if your soils are getting a little dry and you're trying to pollinate, and we just have some blasting heat and south winds. It's really a struggle for that corn plant to pollinate. They do much better than it did with the older hybrids, but with irrigation, if we got enough water there, the plant can kind of cool itself down. Mm-hmm. But dry land, you may be at the mercy of what you've been given. You may be too dry, and we've had years when pollination just did not work at certain planting dates.
Right. With that, K-State has conducted numerous studies on delayed planted corn in recent years, and you have been involved with research at Ottawa and at Topeka for 3 years, from 2018 to 2020. Talk about that work, if you would, Eric, and what you found out about the performance of late-planted corn.
Okay. Actually, we conducted we've got 4 years of data, but this e-update is 3 years of data we got summarized here. But it showed very similar results. What we saw in the irrigated was very similar yield patterns every year, because we took out the moisture variable. And basically, the yield patterns are very good. We would see a yield decline. Mostly the optimum planting date was last half of April. Then it'd start declining, but we would still get 50-60% of the yield when we planted into the first week of June. With dry land, it was a whole different story. There was no nice yield curve. It was extremely variable year to year. It all depended on the weather at the time of the planting and also at what the weather was like at pollination. Some years it helped to plant early in April. That was the highest yield some years. Some years it was the end of May was a high yield. And we had one year that even into June, it was close to the high yield. And all of it keyed on, did we have cold, wet weather early? Did we have really hot, dry weather at pollination when that planting date, the corn in that planting date was trying to pollinate? It just shows the challenges of trying to grow corn in dry land in Kansas.
If we knew what the weather was going to be like, for sure, this coming July, early August, the performance of delayed planting this year would be much more easy to predict. But what are your thoughts based on your work there at Ottawa and at Topeka in this respect for this growing season then?
Yeah, well, what we did see at Ottawa, the late planting date, we had some of them we even went to the last part of June, just the way it worked out. And we still got about 70% of the yield of what the top yield was for all the planting dates, even with the late planting dates. So, it wasn't as high as the irrigation yield. We don't expect that. But if you could have picked the peak date, if you could have guessed right, got it right, and then you had one of your fields got planted in June, you could still anticipate getting about 70% of the yield. I think that's showing just the resilience of the hybrids we've got, the drought tolerance, improved genetics. I think that just shows that we've got some good selections in the hybrid choices we've got that can really handle some of these stresses.
Well, 70% of the yield tied back to what you mentioned, that is your already sunk investment in nitrogen applications. Well, that might just pencil out, Eric.
Yes, it will, especially with the prices we've got now. And when you're committed already. And then I know we're scrambling some places to get soybean seed. So, what are your options? You've already got your corn seed bought, got your anhydrous on. So you may already have a pre-herbicide down that may limit you to corn. So, yeah, I don't think you're written off when you get into June and corn planting in dry land here in Kansas.
I might speak to that a little further. There were other studies done earlier this past decade at 3 other locations further west, Belleville, Manhattan, and Hutchinson specifically. Mm-hmm. As you take a look at those results, are they similar to what you found in the eastern part of the state?
Yes, I think they kind of explain some of what we were seeing. Ignacio Ciampetti did this work, and they grouped them by environments. Environments where the crop was grown, where it's low stress, or he had early stress where it was cool and wet early, which sometimes we face. And then he had high stress, which is basically lower rainfall and higher temperatures later in the season.
This was all dry land, correct?
This is all dry land. And so he did some really neat work, and he showed that the low stress, the planting date didn't have a huge effect. They could still get most of their yield in low stress environments. If you just had almost a perfect year, you didn't have it too wet or cold early, and you didn't have it too hot and dry late, and planting date in the dry land didn't make as big a difference. They were still over 80% of the yield, planting pretty late. They're planting well into June. In the early stress, where it's cool and wet early, actually, the later planting dates yielded better than those ones that really struggled early in the season. They just struggled getting up, couldn't get the population you maybe wanted. The plant's just not doing as well, maybe didn't develop as good a root system or whatever. But the ones planted later, they just took off and grew, and they actually saw a yield increase. Where the struggle we have is with the high stress environment, is where you have the heat and the hot winds and don't get the rains late in the season, where either you're trying to pollinate or you're trying to fill grain. And that's where it really dropped off. That's where you saw yield loss. They were seeing about 1% a day by the time when you delayed planting. If you planted early and the conditions are okay early and the plant got pretty far along before you hit the hot time in mid to late July, it was already pretty well into grain fill. Where if you didn't plant till June and you planted and it was just trying to get going early, where it really should have been adding a lot of vegetative material and needed a lot of resources to really grow that crop, just when the heat hit. So there they saw, in those kind of environments, they saw about a 1% yield drop in delayed planting. Now, how do you predict that?
Right,
So
exactly.
But that kind of explains what we saw. Some of the dryland data we saw at Ottawa, it's really variable. It just depends on the type of season you have, which one's really going to pan out and have the best yield. There's a lot of guesswork. I mean, farmers, especially in Kansas, we kind of gamble a lot because we can't predict the weather. But at least we've got some data. We kind of know here's the scenarios, and we have potential. If we get one break, if we get one rain, or this can still have a pretty decent crop.
Well, if producers would like a direct look at the data, it's captured in a recent article as of last week, as a matter of fact, in the Agronomy E-Update series on delayed planted corn. The easiest way to access that is simply search for K-State Agronomy E-Update, and that'll take you right to the series. Eric, thanks for summarizing this. Appreciate it as always.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
He is the agronomist in charge of K-State's Kansas River Valley and East Central Kansas experiment fields. That's Eric Adee with us. And we'll be back on Agriculture Today. You are listening to Agriculture Today. Our aim here is to bring to your attention resources that you'll find on the agmanager.info website, recently posted, and these are for you producers concerned about your forage supplies as we're heading into the summer and even looking farther down the road. Joining us again is agricultural economist Robin Reid of K-State Research and Extension, and she has put together a couple of things here. A summary of the USDA aid program for qualifying producers in designated counties, livestock forage disaster assistance, as well as a hay inventory calculator that she has cobbled together for you producers to use. More on that in just a second. This USDA program, we want to outline it, Robin. It's in place, and several counties in Kansas, because of their drought conditions, have qualified, right?
Yeah, so this program isn't new, but really wanting it to bring it to the forefront this year as we've had a really dry fall and winter, getting a little precipitation now, but all producers can recognize we don't have the forage out there that we normally do at this time of year. And a lot of our counties can qualify now for this livestock forage disaster program and receive payment even that we're just barely into this grazing season. So I really want to make producers aware of this program, that they can go in and get their payments even today. Without even being into the grazing season very far, we can really see that forage is going to be a big issue this year. You pulled together this information so producers can have a handy place to learn more about the program. LFP for short, as it's called. How does it work expressly? Well, basically, the county has to qualify. And right now, we have 65 counties in Kansas that qualify in one form or the other on some sort of forage that can receive payment. I'm going to focus mostly on native pasture as we talk through this, because that is where most producers would qualify. And right now, there's over 40 counties that qualify for that. And that's mostly, obviously, southwest Kansas. We've had a lot of drought, central Kansas areas, and then northwest Kansas has 8 counties also that qualify. So once the county qualifies, it's also assigned a number of months. And that number of months can either be 1 month payment, 3 month payment, 4 month, or even 5 month. And what that refers to is looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor and what level of drought that county has experienced or is currently experiencing. So most of the counties for native pasture are actually in that 3 to 4 month window. So that is either an extreme drought intensity of a D3 or exceptional drought of a D4. We even have some counties down in southwest Kansas that qualify for 5 months right now at exceptional drought levels. So what that means is there's a monthly payment based on the type of livestock that you have on your pasture, and then that monthly payment gets multiplied by how many months that county is qualifying for.
And that is based on a specific formula, and we'll walk through it as best we can here on the radio to identify the level of payments then.
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. So, bottom line is talk to your Farm Service Agency office, fill out an application, and they will help you calculate this payment. But really, in a nutshell, what it is, if we're talking beef cows, that's $47.29 per animal. There's a little bit of a caveat here because you have to be within the county's normal stocking rate. So if you're overstocking that pasture, they're not going to pay on every single one of those animals. They'll pay based on the stocking rate that county is assigned. So my example here in the paper, if we had 50 cows in Ottawa County, they're at 8 acres per head, so 50 cows on 400 acres. You'd take that 50 cows times $47.29 per cow, and then there's some reductions on that payment. So they're paying 60% of that, and then the 4 months, as I said, in Ottawa County, so times 4. There's also a budget sequestration on that payment. So bottom line, there's a lot of things to reduce that down. But in my example there, that'd be a little over $5,000 for that 50 cows in Ottawa County. So it is definitely worth going in and signing up for. And what that payment is trying to get at, that $47.29, what does it take to feed that cow for a month? And then this program will share 60% of that expense.
Beyond the formula, it's a pretty straightforward program, isn't it, Robin?
It really is. So, as a producer, as I said, go into your Farm Service Agency office, fill out an application. You do have to timely report your acreage report and things like that. So you really want to watch those deadlines. But basically, these counties right now qualify. And like I said, even though we're very much in the beginning of the grazing season, you can go in now and sign up and you'll receive the payment as you would get today. If your county later on has more extreme drought designation and there is additional payment, you will automatically get those. You don't have to go in and reapply. There's no point in waiting and seeing if a more extreme drought actually happens. Once you're in the program, if there's additional payments, you'll automatically get them.
And there's a possibility that more counties will be added as the grazing season goes on.
Absolutely. So when I first published this paper, there were 36 counties that qualified for native pasture, and just last week they expanded that to about 8 additional counties. So there's likely going to be some adjustments to what counties qualify and what do not. And I mentioned there's 65 counties actually available, so I've been talking native pasture, but other counties also qualify for annual ryegrass, cool season improved pasture, warm season improved pasture, forage sorghum, small grains that are planted for grazing. There are other categories that your county might qualify under, but basically this program covers forage that is meant for livestock grazing.
Well, it's known as the Livestock Forage Disaster Program, available in numerous counties in Kansas. Robin has pulled together all the particulars on it in this article on agmanager.info. Give that a look and be in touch with your local FSA personnel on applying for this assistance in the counties that qualify, of course. The other thing we wanted to mention today, Robin, producers are trying to keep tabs on their hay inventories. That's a worry here because of the dry weather and the concerns over lack of productivity. You have come up with what you're calling a hay inventory calculator, also at agmanager.info. What's this inspiration?
Basically, what I was looking at here was trying to match what hay you have in inventory, what you're going to produce this summer, and then how does that match up with what your cow herd requirements are going to be. So really what we're trying to do in estimating cow herd requirements is, the number of head you have, their mature weight, the days that you plan on feeding them hay, and then we use the dry matter percentage intake of their body weight kind of as a proctor for getting to what is that total dry matter hay that we're going to need for this cow herd. And, this really varies by what stage of production they're in. So some of our dry cows that haven't calved yet this winter will be consuming less of their body weight than after they calve, and they're going to be lactating. So there is a table in the tool, too, to kind of help you decide what percentage of body weight you're going to want to estimate. And obviously this changes, too, based on what energy and protein supplement and things those cows will be receiving. But once you put that in, you'll get a total amount in tons and a total amount in round bales, is what I'm looking at here, of what you're going to need based on how long your cows will be consuming hay. And this is where you can play around with, well, maybe normally they're in the lot for 6 months, but if I have to pull them off the pasture early, maybe we're going to need to increase that another month or two, and then do I have the hay that I need? So the next section looks at, well, how many bales do you have on hand right now? What is the average bale weight? And then what are the different fields that you're going to bale this year? And what is your anticipated tons per acre for the average yield on those fields? And so that way we get it. What's an inventory? What's our anticipated production? And then how many tons and how many bales of hay will be available? And now there's a little adjustment that we need to make here, though, in that we're going to have some storage losses and we're going to have some feeding losses. So I kind of put some estimates in there of, depending on how you're storing the hay and depending on how you're delivering it to the cattle, what you might anticipate losing in storage and feeding. But the tool itself will adjust. Once you put in those percentages, it'll adjust what you have available and what you need, and then tell you, do you have a surplus or a shortage?
It's, again, a simple spreadsheet where one can plug in their own values. It's very handy.
Well, and what I would encourage is people start thinking about this now. I'm sure a lot of people are recognizing the situation and worried about what it might turn out to be. But really planning for the situation, I think, will bring a lot of peace of mind. Having that contingency plan in place. Yes, I have enough hay available. I don't need to be worrying about this in the middle of the night kind of thing. So being able to put that on paper and see what that balance is, if maybe you have a surplus, and there's going to be some very good opportunities to market some hay this summer. So just seeing where you're at and then being able to, as a manager, decide, can I sell or do I need to buy hay?
It's not too early to be thinking about that before we get into the heavy hay feeding season in the fall and winter. A tremendous tool. Take advantage of it, livestock producers. It's simply called the Hay Inventory Calculator, and it's a spreadsheet that you'll find also at agmanager.info. And congratulations on all this good work, Robin. Thank you. We appreciate the word on all of it.
Thank you, Eric.
That from Robin Reid, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. We'll be back with more here on Agriculture Today. We're back now on this Agriculture Today and around to our weekly horticulture segment. Pulling information from an event which is coming up not too long from now, in fact, next Wednesday, is the next K-State Garden Hour webinar. That'll be on June the 1st over the noon hour. The topic of choice this time around will be organic pest management for vegetable gardens. And the individual who'll be presenting information on that subject with us now, Zac Hoppenstedt, Johnson County Extension Horticulture Agent. Zac, thanks once again for joining us here. Organic gardening, there are more than a few folks out there who gravitate toward that, but it does add another wrinkle when it comes to pest management for such gardens, right?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. It definitely is. There's increased interest, especially for people doing edible crops, to practice organic methods in their home gardens particularly. And we're getting into that point of the season where folks maybe started off with a lot of energy and excitement, and the garden is looking really full and lush, but it's not before too long that we can have especially some bug or insect pest damage, which can kind of throw us for a loop or, make us wish we had maybe decided on a different summer hobby.
Hopefully it won't get to that point. When we think about organic control then, What are the alternatives? And you'll be covering these in the webinar, but it breaks down into, well, biological controls and cultural management as well.
Yeah, those are two great categories of options. Obviously, chemicals are both synthetic and organic, and whether you're a conventional or organic grower, those are usually the sort of what we encourage as the last line of defense. So we'll really be trying to go over with attendees next week proper identification so that they know what intervention is best suited or whether intervention is required at all, and making sure that we're not eliminating beneficial insects or natural predators and parasites that actually can control some of the unwanted bugs that we get on the plants in the garden.
In as far, though, as organic control products, is there quite a lineup that suits the need here, generally speaking?
And, actually, like more and more at the local home garden center, you have access to more organic chemicals and control products. And it can be actually overwhelming, the diversity that is available now all over the state, and regardless of, the scale of grower or experienced grower. And, I think that what we'll try to focus on are some of the most commonly available products, understanding their mode of action and how they target specific pest species or a more broad spectrum. And those are definitely the types of products that we need to be especially careful with because, those can have a lethal effect on beneficials and pollinators. We definitely want to protect our bees in the organic garden. And so just trying to educate folks on, like I said, what the impact, even organic products have an environmental impact, and being discerning about how we employ those organic chemicals.
How might one be part of the webinar? It's an hour-long session, again, this coming Wednesday, June the 1st. It's a fairly simple process, isn't it, Zac?
Yeah, I think easiest thing to do would just probably be to Google the K-State Garden Hour, and there is a registration button. It'll take you to the Horticulture Natural Resource webpage at the university's website. And it'll be this upcoming Wednesday and every first Wednesday of the month, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Central. It just requires you to have internet connection, and you can participate through Q&A, through chat, or through the Zoom video conferencing software.
It's a great exchange. It's free of charge. Organic pest management for vegetable gardens will be the topic, June the 1st. Simply search for K-State Garden Hour. That'll take you to the registration process. Zac, thanks for the comments right here. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Eric.
Zac Hoppenstedt, Johnson County Extension Horticulture Agent. That is this week's horticulture segment, rounding out our Thursday edition. Thanks for listening. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.